The I'm Fine podcast is produced by L'Amour Media, LLC, and is run by Project Headspace and Timing. Project Headspace and Timing is a 501c3 that I started in 2017 after a veteran that I was a medic to decided to pull over on the side of the road and end his life. As an organization, Project Headspace and Timing works on veteran advocacy and veteran outreach. What that means is through the advocacy perspective, we try to connect veterans to other resources as early on into the process as possible. What that entails is early contact with veterans, forming a safety net with their family members, friends, and fellow service members, educating them on the resources, and when that veteran is ready to get help, we are there to make sure that they get the help that they need. The outreach aspect is put there to get veterans together to do productive and constructive things, whether it's out in nature, working with other businesses, anything to get them out around other veterans where those good conversations can happen if they want to have them. If you are interested in finding out more information about our organization, please visit projectheadspaceandtiming.org, our Facebook page, Project Headspace and Timing, or our Instagram, which is Project Headspace and Timing. And if you would like to donate to our organization, please visit our website, projectheadspaceandtiming.org. Scroll to the bottom and you will find a link to our Venmo. If you'd like to send us a check, our P.O. Box is P.O. Box 382, Manteno, Illinois, 60950. And if you'd like to sponsor or have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at Eric P. as in Paul, at projectheadspaceandtiming.org. Thank you. Welcome to episode 4 of the I'm Fine podcast. Today we're going to talk about grief. Grief has greatly impacted both Brad and I's lives, and we really want to share those journeys with you, along with talking about what grief is, the stages of grief, and dealing with grief. So strap in for what I assume could potentially be a fairly emotional episode of the I'm Fine podcast.
Welcome to the I'm Fine podcast with your freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional hosts, Eric Peterson and Brad Stozick.
So how you feeling, man?
Feeling good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How's school been going? You just started back school.
School's good.
Yeah?
Yeah, school's good. School is, college is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
college is tough.
we started this podcast in a time where, like, both of us had so much stuff going on. And for me, we started this right before our festival, like our one festival of the year. And
Yes.
so the first few episodes, like, you know, it was really hectic. Our schedules are hectic. It's kind of opening up a little bit right now. I don't know. It's tough with school and everything like that, but...
Well, your schedule's opening and mine is closing. So
Well, yeah.
there's that.
And how many times have I picked you up and I've been on like phone call after phone call after phone call? Like this second you get in my car, like I can't even talk to you for like, I don't know.
Every time you pick me
minutes.
up.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. And so people don't understand, like I'm always 5 minutes late and I'm always on the phone pretty much. You know what I mean? But
Every time.
But I feel like it's kind of starting to open up a little bit now that we're into episode 4. We're starting to figure out how we want this to work and getting more
I think so.
comfortable with ourselves, other than our hand placement for the video. Because
Yeah,
you were just
that's-
talking about how like we don't know what to do with our hands. And my suggestion is the Will Ferrell, just keep them up, just hold them up like this in front of the camera for the entire podcast, every single episode.
I don't know if I have the endurance for that, dude.
That's shoulders.
Yeah.
That's a lot of shoulder strength, I think.
These shoulders are a little depressing.
Oh, speaking of depressing. So we got some, you know, we wanted to take this podcast on, and we're talking about some heavy shit, man. Like some of these and grief was something that you and I wanted to talk about from the very beginning. Initially, episode 1 was going to be called Fuck Cancer.
It
Remember
was.
when we talked about it for a while.
Yes.
We both have dealt with it a lot. It's impacted, it's shaped our lives from early ages to now. And
Absolutely.
so one thing that you said before we started this was that you have not been looking forward to this episode of it.
Not at all.
Why is that?
This one I think is just gonna hit hard. It's gonna. I'm not really a fan of talking about my past and rehashing out things that cut pretty deep, you know?
Yay! It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
We need those we need those sound effects.
Yeah.
This goofy sound effects that we can play while we're telling these incredibly depressing, sad, and frustrating stories.
Right.
Just to lighten the mood a little bit.
I know.
But what we talked about earlier is when it comes to grief, especially, which we'll get into, you can't run from shit.
Right.
You have to be open as you possibly can. And you can lie to the rest of the world, but you can't lie to yourself. You got to talk about that shit, even if it's to yourself.
It's part of the healing process, man.
So,
for sure.
First off, what is grief? So, Oxford Dictionary says that grief is being in a deep sorrow, especially caused by someone's death, right? Whenever we think about grief, you associate it with death, I think, it's fair to say, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And before we did this podcast, what I didn't know is I didn't know that there were so many other things that grief can be a part of. So when we look this up, crosswindcounseling.org says that causes of grief outside of death include divorce, separation, imprisonment, injury, retirement, pregnancy, miscarriage, child leaving home, and changing residences. So grief it doesn't just follow death. No. And when I saw that it follows divorce, and I know you have some stuff to talk about this, about in a little bit about this, but it's I think of my close friends and family that I've watched go through divorce. And then you think of the steps of grief, the stages of grief that we're going to talk about in a second. You're like, oh shit. Yeah. They hit those same kind of things, right?
For sure.
And those stages of grief. So there's 5 stages of grief. Depending on what you look up, we're a couple of knuckleheads. Depending on what you look up, you can find as many stages as possible as far as how many stages there are of grief. But what we're basing this off of is the Kubler-Ross model, the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a Swiss-American psychiatrist, a pioneer of studies on dying people, and in 1969 she wrote the book On Death and Dying, where she proposed these 5 stages. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And bums me out there's no all those suck to deal with. None of them are fun. There's no good, and I really just wish one of them could be the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and tap dancing.
Dancing. Just
something that doesn't suck, because all those suck.
I think once you get to the acceptance stage, I think what sucks most about it is that it cycles. It's a repeat. You get the acceptance stage, you're like, yes, I've accepted it. I'm okay with what just happened. And then the next day you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that this just happened. Back into denial.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. And it's not even so much when you say it's a cycle, yep. But it's a cycle not in a perfect circular type of way.
Oh, no.
It's take a bunch of fucking spaghetti noodles, wet ones, and throw them on the table. And you're it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because you go from denial to bargaining, depression, anger, depression, anger, depression, anger. I pretty much bounce between depression and anger like old school Pong. I'm always there.
Yes.
I'm either at anger or depression.
And then denial kind of slips in.
Denial and bargaining, not so much for me.
No.
And I've talked to my friends and therapists about that too. And I think that's because 1, I was raised Catholic, and 2, I was a grunt. So I just expect shit to go wrong.
Okay.
I expect shit to go wrong. And I feel like if I'm going through denial and bargaining, that I'm almost wasting my time. Because I'm I can't change this. This is what's happening. No amount of bargaining is going to get me out of this. No amount of denial is going to undo what's happening right now.
Yeah.
But instead, I really just bounce, like I said, between anger and depression, I feel like. You know what I mean?
Yep. And I think from the clinical side, all the models, they show the perfect circle of going through the stages.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the proper way to go about that. Because like you said, it's not like that. You don't experience depression for a week and then go to denial and then acceptance. You know what I mean? There's no timetable for the feelings that you feel.
You wish it would be that clean cut, right?
Right,
Where you
yeah.
could just set your watch to it. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be in denial for the next 47 minutes.
Yep.
And then boom, anger.
Yep.
But like you said, we should draw a model and
Yeah.
then submit it to like the DSM people and just take spaghetti noodles,
Yep.
wet ones,
Yep.
throw them at a table, and then just take a picture of it, boop, and then say, here are the stages of anger, or the stages of grief.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because that's how I feel. And
I don't think you're alone on that.
right. And with that acceptance, you also feel like you've reached acceptance and that's the final stage. So everything must be fine now. And then all of a sudden, anger and depression are like, what's up, buddy? Like they just kind of peek around your shoulder and you're like, fuck, I thought I was done with you guys. And like it just kind of volleys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like when I've experienced it, you know, I hit my lowest lows. And like you hit a low and you're like, this is as low as I can get. Nope. Go a little bit lower and a little bit lower still. And emotionally and psychologically, you get so exhausted that you almost hit these like spurts where it's like the eye of the storm, I feel like.
Yep.
Where all of a sudden, like for a second, you don't feel those emotions now.
Yep.
Because I think it's maybe you're just exhausted. And it's almost like a high type of feeling. You know what I mean? Where it's not like you're happy by any means, but it's almost like maybe it's the numbness and things that come along with it. But for a little bit, I've also experienced those moments of, I just think my body's so tired, my brain is so tired that all those emotions just all get shut off for a little bit too. And you reach this weird type of feeling where I don't want to use the word enlightening because that almost sounds, I think that glorifies it. And I'm not trying to glorify it. But it's similar to that because I think you just, when you come to that understanding of the unfairness of the world and how so many things happen that are outside of your control, there's almost a sort of peace with that. Because I think inherently we try to control so much.
Yeah.
And you always want to control things in your life. And when you experience grief, it's something that you couldn't control, something traumatic. Knowing that there's nothing you can do almost brings you some sort of peace. I mean, does that sound bad?
No, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to grieving and stuff, we do anything in our power to find that sense of peace. And I think it really doesn't matter what route that is, just as long as you, because like you said, it's exhausting. It is exhausting to grieve, to be sad, to be angry. So you need that moment of calmness, that moment of it's okay.
And I think it just kind of breaks it up a little bit just to kind of help you out because it's such a stressful experience.
Absolutely.
You know? And like the anger that you feel so weird, because like grief consumes you.
Yeah.
It consumes you so much that like when I've experienced grief, you'll walk outside and you'll see somebody laughing and you're like, what the fuck are those people laughing about? Like you get mad at some strangers for just having a good day because you're having a shitty day. So heretofore, everybody should be having a shitty day because you're having a shitty day. And like, you run through those types of feelings. And the only way I could explain it was, you know, I was just angry that the world was still turning.
Sure.
Because it's like, my world has changed. My world has stopped. But the world for everybody else is still continuing and they're still experiencing all these great things in life. And out of a moment of just selfish frustration, you know, that makes you mad. You know what I mean? Did you experience that too a little bit? Just kind of lashing out?
Sort of. At like other people's happiness. Like, why are you? Yeah. Do you feel guilt with grief? Like, do you feel like, so for example, for my sister, like I felt guilty like for her because she has such a busy life, right? And she put everything on hold, right? I did a lot too. Like my wife and I, we when my dad got sick, I mean, dude, she was by his bedside every single day. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, like for me, I felt guilty. Like I should be doing more. But you know what I mean? Like,
yes. I think you're always going to feel that grief because the type of mindset I think a lot of people have is that we can always do more. Yeah. So it's like when you find out that a parent has a terminal illness,
Yeah.
a loved one has a terminal illness, you want to spend every second of the day with them. Now, you know that might not be possible because you have other responsibilities, other priorities. Now, most of those priorities aren't nearly as important as your parents, but then you have your kids.
Yeah.
You have to provide for those kids. You need to make sure that you are doing what's necessary to keep your family unit going. But I think that guilt absolutely comes to be a part of it. And I'll talk more about this later, but when my mom got sick the second time and I was told that it was terminal, like that moment I told myself, okay, there can't be any regrets here. And there can't be any regrets from this point forward because I don't want to carry that with me while I'm also processing the possible loss of one of the most, if not the most important person in my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so do I think I can spend more time? Of course, but we're always going to think that, and that's not fair. I don't think it's fair to say that to yourself. But when you say to yourself, like, the quality-wise, am I doing what I know I can do, and there's quality to my visits, there's quality to my time spending together? Like, I'm making sure that I'm doing what I think I should be doing, and if I can just say yes to that, then I need to be okay with that because, again, I could always tell myself I could spend more time, I could do this, I could do that. You're always going to be able to say that to yourself. Unless you're spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with that person, you're going to tell yourself, oh, I could always do more. And so that's not fair to beat yourself up about it, in my opinion. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not fair to beat yourself up about it. You know what I mean?
You know what's crazy, dude? You're saying unless you spent so much time. Over the summer I didn't have school, right? So I was at my dad's 24/7.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he would, I was hanging out with him, and then he would need something, but he'd be like, "Hey, Michelle, can you do this? Hey, Michelle, can you help me with this?" And I'm like, "Dad, I'm right here. I can help you out. I'm here to help you. You can't see." Like, and he said that, "You can't see very well. Just have Michelle help me." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm here to help you."
Right.
Like, I know maybe just hanging out is helping enough, but I am a fully functioning member of society.
Yeah.
I can take care of my sick dad if you need help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was like, not only was I grieving my dad dying, now it feels like I am useless. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man.
That I'm just somebody who can't see, just sitting on the couch doing nothing as my dad is dying.
Yeah. But with that, I would have to venture to guess too. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the situation, but from like his perspective, maybe he just wanted you there. Yeah. And he didn't want you to have to do anything else. And because you were there so often, he also wanted to involve other family members or whatever the case may be. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but you can't tell yourself that you're worthless because of that or anything else, regardless of the circumstance. Because the thing about it is that nobody in this world can tell you what you're worth. The only person that can is yourself. Yeah. And other people can seem like they're telling you what your worth is, but really they're just kind of, more or less reflecting on themselves, I think. So nobody can tell you what you're capable of.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the fact that you were spending your time there too should also kind of combat that feeling of grief because, dude, you were spending time with him also.
Yeah.
And regardless of the issues that you have to deal with every day, you still managed to have the intestinal fortitude to go and be there for your dad, which is something you should be proud of. Because how long have you been dealing with visual impairment for?
It's been about 4 or 5 years now.
Excuse me. So 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So, do you have that completely handled and, good to go with all that? Have that all figured out and you're just totally good with everything that comes with that?
Yeah, that was after like week 3.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
so something pretty easy to get over with. You're like, things are darker now, but everything's fine. Yeah. No, you're still fucking dealing with that every day,
Absolutely.
dude. You're dealing with that. You're dealing with your kids. You're dealing with family. You're dealing with everything, man. So, yeah, again, just not fair to beat yourself up about, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with that, so, I looked in the DSM and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and they actually included something for grief in March of 2022. So in March of this year, they had a revision, and they added prolonged grief disorder. So it's the one thing that they added to the DSM, which is also known as complicated grief, traumatic grief, and persistent complex bereavement disorder. So it's for people that are still grieving 1 year after experiencing a loss, which when I first read that, I was like, that's fucking everybody that experiences grief.
Yep.
But it said, and also unable to return to everyday activities. So,
Okay.
I mean, that would be, that's a defining thing to me, because I'm just like, okay, because like for me, I'm still able to do my everyday activities for the most part. I had to take some time here and there.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Where for a few days or a week or whatever, like I'm not doing so great, but I got to slow some things down. But that made sense. That made sense to me. So like prolonged grief disorder, which they say they expect that to apply to about 4% of bereaving people. But so as far as first experiences with grief, so
Yeah.
it's very important, I think, to think about those first times that you actually did experience grief in your life.
Yeah.
Because if that's not something that's accepted, it can cause issues later, which you talked about. So I know you've had a few more prominent, impactful experiences with grief at a young age than I did, right?
I did. Yeah. I actually, it was about the same time, 8th grade. Like I've mentioned before in previous episodes, my grandmother passing. Yeah, that probably was my very first encounter with genuinely grieving something that had a really big impact in my life.
And you were in 8th grade?
Yes, 8th grade.
Do you
Yep,
remember,
yep, yep.
are there any moments that stick out to you? Like that you have just that own real estate in your mind?
The moment she passed, man.
Yeah.
We were there. I mean, I wasn't there when it happened, but the night before it happened, my mom and my dad were like, all right, it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later. Go say what you need to say. She's not going to be able to respond to you, but she can hear you. And in a way, I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Because that was it. You know what I mean? That was the final goodbye.
It's okay, man. And that moment that you brought up when it's like, say what you need to say.
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. And how do you tell a 13-year-old? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is it.
Yeah.
Say everything you have to say to your grandma for the last time, because that's it. Dude, what?
And it's a shitty situation because on one end, do you just deny everything to your kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to let them know, like, these are the stakes right now.
Yeah.
Because hopefully that adds a little bit more understanding on your side. So like I understand, I think the parent side, and that also comes from something we relate with in telling our children about what we've been dealing with recently.
Yep.
So I understand that too. It's just a shitty situation all around. Because the amount of emotional weight I think that puts on you. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to talk about the last episode of Power Rangers that I just saw. Like, what the fuck am I going to talk about as a kid?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you talked to her about?
I don't, man. I just know it was a lot of crying.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I love you 1,000 times. I mean, what do you say? They can't respond. You go. I went in there. I don't know when I went in there expecting. I went in there. It was a hospital bed. She was. Her eyes were closed. She was breathing, but it was kind of like. And then you'd wait a long time, and then there was another. You know what I mean? So it was just like a really long, and it's just like you see that, and that's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that in my life, so I didn't know what to expect. So of course I see that and instantly start crying because I knew I wasn't a super young child. I wasn't dumb.
Right.
I knew what was happening.
Right.
And it just, to see that, it was tough, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember walking in, saying I love you like 1,000 times, and then just crying.
Yeah.
And I sat at the foot of the bed and just cried. And everybody else, they came in, and then I walked out, and I walked into my grandma's room, and my grandpa was sitting on the bed, and I've never seen my grandpa cry.
Oh,
I've never seen him cry, and he was bawling his eyes out.
And when you see the like the male figurehead of your family, like if you have that type of experience, because I have a similar experience, like where you've never seen them cry, and then you see them cry, that's like like nope.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's when you know shit hit the fan, and it's serious.
Yeah. And you remember it vividly.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh
because
yeah.
it was so fucking insane.
Oh yeah.
That you saw this person cry because you've never seen this person cry before. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Like when I had to tell my daughter about what's going on with my mom and her terminal cancer and all this other stuff, I didn't know if I should tell my daughter or not. So my oldest daughter is 5, and I wanted her to know what was happening. So I took her out. We grabbed some ice cream, and we went to this beautiful park in my town in Mantino, and we sat down together and we ate it. And then I talked to her about life, and I've talked to her about life and death before.
Sure.
And I talked to her about what was going on with Lola. And when I talked to her about it for a little bit, and I let her know what was happening, because my daughter hadn't seen my mom since she's been in the hospital, so it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
And now that my mom's at home with hospice or with uplifted care, like I want to bring my daughters around her so my kids can see her again. And so I wanted her to know going into this is what's going on, and I just want you to be aware of it, because I'm very open with my kids like that. And she asked me a ton of questions.
Yeah.
I answered them all. And then she just started bawling. And when she started bawling, I started bawling. And then she saw me crying, and she started crying even more, because I'm not a huge crier.
Yep.
Yet, with everything going on with my mom, I've cried more times in the past 2 weeks than like my entire life. I'm fairly certain it's safe to say.
And you know what? It's okay.
Yes.
It's okay.
And that's the thing, is like, I don't run from it. Like I've cried, it's like a fucking Dr. Seuss book. I've cried in the bathroom, in the hallway, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the, like I've in the car, on your way to work, at the gas station, like just, you can be anywhere and it just hits you.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, I'm not even going to hold this in. And so, but we got to have that talk, and it was very meaningful. And I could tell that my daughter understood what was happening. And then we went over to visit my mom, and, my daughter she was perfect. She was amazing. Like she just went in there and just wanted to spend time with Lola and laugh and play and color pictures for her and show them to her. So I don't know the kind of impact it can have on a young person. But you looked into that, right?
I did. And actually, I don't remember the website, so I apologize for not having that. But I did find that childhood grief, if not dealt with properly, is one of a major leading cause to adulthood depression.
And that makes sense.
Yes. And it makes me rack my brain like, is this why I'm depressed?
I mean, certainly it's part of it. If it's something you don't get to accept and acknowledge and move on from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it absolutely makes sense. And then you put on top of that what we talked about earlier. So there's other things other than death that cause grief.
Yep.
And so as a kid, obviously if somebody dies in your life, you will experience grief, but you can also experience grief from a divorce.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like we were talking about earlier, like initially when I heard that, I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day who invited me out to get a beer because he just knew what was happening, in my personal life right now. And we were getting on the topic of grief. And he was like, well, I don't understand what you're going through, but, I'm here for you. And I was like, I appreciate that, dude. But I know that he went through a divorce. And I said, you've been through a divorce. I think you've been through similar things. And he said, no, that's not anything like what you're going through. And some details, yes. But then when we found this, I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and then finally acceptance. How is that not what you go through?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, you dealt with it as a kid, right?
I did. Yeah, my parents did. They got divorced actually around the exact same time that my grandma passed. They were going through the divorce. I'll never forget. My grandma was sick, and then my mom and I were sitting in the car and we were driving. My mom goes, "Hey, I need to ask you something." And she goes, "How would you feel if your father and I split up?" Right? And I was trying to be like the brave, like man of the house type guy. And I was like, "Well, Mom, if it means your happiness, I'm okay with it. Like if it means you're gonna be happy, I'm okay." Obviously, I wasn't freaking okay with it. That's my entire life was splitting up. You know what I'm saying? Like in a sense, a divorce is almost like death, right? Because you're losing somebody you love in a way.
It's the death of a relationship.
Yeah.
It's the death of all possible future experiences and memories that will happen from that relationship. Like it's the death of those things.
Yes, exactly. And as getting that as a child, it's like I didn't know any better than I had no idea my parents' personal life. I had no clue. So my mom's like, "Hey, how would you feel about that?" "Oh, I'm fine, Mom."
And if we remember what Melanie said on her episode 3, was like one of the things that they're finding is the more responsibilities that you put on the kids at a younger age, the more issues that could actually cause later in life with anxiety and responsibilities and duty and all that other kind of stuff. So, I mean, you think you got to step up to the plate now, which I think is the natural response for any kid, for any good kid that's like, this is what's happening with my parents. I got to be there for my mom. I got to be there for my dad. Like that's what you were feeling.
Yes and no, because it almost felt like I was in the position where I had to choose sides. I had to pick almost. And I know that wasn't the case, but it felt like that.
And I feel like that it's got to be so hard to navigate as the parent having the divorce.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with your own traumatic experience. And you have kids in the mix. So it's like you're trying to you're not trying to make the kid pick sides, but you're also going through your own personal trauma. Your kid's going to see that, knowing that trauma involves the other parent. So it's like you're getting pulled into this place, I feel like, where you're going to feel like anyone would feel like they would have to choose a side regardless of what the parents would say or do.
And unintentionally, just out of emotions and anger. I mean, I've never been on the side of divorce of like going through the divorce, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But emotionally, like people are human. You're going to just express you're feeling angry. You're going to express that anger. Yeah. You're going to say things. You're not going to care who's around you. Both of my parents, they said some shit in front of me that they probably shouldn't have.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, well, now you're saying things about the other parent.
Right.
Am I supposed to feel this way now? How do I believe that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to, and it's, as a kid, you're impressionable.
Oh my God. You just believe anything an adult says to you pretty much.
Exactly. So it's hard. One of the hardest things was like, my mom was so mad at my dad that it was like, oh, he's such a bad person. Like this, that, and the third. And she was upset at him that they got divorced. And for a while, for me, I was like, oh man, my dad sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not the case. Obviously, I love my dad very much. I've expressed that, you know. But at the time, I was like, oh no, the hell with this dude. Like,
I've seen other kids do that in divorces.
Yeah.
I've been there through the divorces of friends and family members where you've seen the kid or kids gravitate to one person initially, and then as time goes on and they experience all of the different things that life has to offer to experience, they start experiencing those things. Then they take that step back and they're like, okay, I need to reevaluate. I need to understand that I could have been wrong on a few things. I could have jumped to some conclusions here. End of the day, we're all human beings. My parents deserve to be happy. They deserve love.
Of course.
Regardless of the way that they go about finding it. Like, as long as they still care about me and they're good parents, like I want them to be happy too. You know what I mean? So it's very hard to go through all that as a kid. I have to imagine. I haven't been through that, but it seems like that's what I think from what you've told me.
Yeah, and I think it only gets easier, like you just said, when you are able to be mature enough and old enough to formulate your own opinions about the situation, about everything that happened. Because like you just said, I have taken the time. I have sat down and looked back at the divorce, and I look back at everything that happened, how it played out. And a lot of the thoughts that I had, I didn't formulate on my own.
Sure.
So I think divorce in more ways than one can really impact a child in more ways than, and I know it's everyone, you should be worried about your kid at all times, but I think you have to focus on your happiness too, though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
Agreed.
But I think divorce in general is just a sticky, nasty situation whenever there's children involved.
Well, to help the saying goes, right? To help others, you have to help yourself first. And that's not just meant to be selfish. It's meant to mean, I think, that like, if you are dealing with all this trauma, then and you are still processing all this stuff and you're having these hard times, I mean, you have to work on that too.
Yep.
So you can be the better husband, the better friend, the better father, the better whatever. Like that comes with working on yourself first. Like they say, if you want to change the world, you change yourself.
Yep.
And then after you change, and then you you blossom out from there. So yes, what you said earlier too, like, is there a line? Of course there's a line. You know what I mean? But the hard part is that line is not easily defined. There's not this perfect little thing where it's like you can do exactly this much stuff for yourself and then you got to stop after that. Yep. Like you're just figuring it out as you go.
Yep.
And then you find a hobby or something that you enjoy and hopefully it's constructive and not deconstructive.
Yep.
And you try to, and then you get, if you're dealing with grief from anything, you get into those phases where, like I told you, where like I've gotten so hyper-focused that we're finishing my basement right now, which will be our new studio. And like throughout my grieving process, sometimes I would just go down there and I would just start drywalling.
Yeah.
I would just get hyper-focused on that.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? But yeah, so no, divorce can cause a lot of issues for everybody involved. And I think that this isn't to talk about how terrible divorce is. Like people know that shit.
Oh,
it's just people also need to understand that grief follows divorce too.
Absolutely.
Not for just the people involved, but for the kids. And just like with anything else, you get to that acceptance phase and hopefully it makes everything more manageable in the future.
Yep.
And then you can work together. And if you have a good safety net, good people around you, while it doesn't take the pain away, it at least lets you know that you're not alone and that you're cared for, you know?
Yeah.
And that's that buffer, I think. And when you dealt with those things as a kid, did you ever get to accept? Like, where were you at with all that stuff? Did you get to do was there anything that helped you out with that?
Or in regards to like the divorce and my grandma's death, or just the divorce?
Either one of them.
Oh, so for my grandmother's passing, I've recently just accepted it within the past 3-4 years.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
And what was it that made you understand, like, oh, I'm accepting it now, years later?
My dad passing, actually. Because I noticed like the cycles of grieving and the cycles, and I noticed myself getting to acceptance with my dad. So I was like, you know what? It's okay. With you know what I mean? So I kind of went back, relived everything, and almost re-grieved the death of my grandma in a way.
I think it seems like it's really important to do, though. It seems like that's a productive thing.
Absolutely, because I was able to get the closure that I didn't have 13 years ago when I was an angry teenager.
Right.
So I think that helped. And then as far as the divorce, I accepted that, I think, sooner, just in the fact that I was seeing my mom. She was unhappy. And I noticed that when they did separate, she became happier. So I was like, okay, my mom's happy now. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's all right.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to be okay because my parents, they weren't perfect. No couple is, you know what I'm saying? They argued quite a bit, but there was definitely a shift in my mom when it was final.
Yeah.
And that's, And unfortunately with that, there was also a shift in my dad,
Right.
you know? Yeah, I think that's when I saw that shift in
Yeah.
my parents, that's when I think I accepted.
Yeah, because as the kid, especially in a divorce, and again, this is coming from an outsider's opinion, but it's like you don't have really any control.
Yeah.
Just like with death or anything else, you're just kind of there watching it all happen and trying to deal with it as it comes.
Yep.
So it's like I feel like it would make sense that acceptance for the kid comes when you understand that the people going through it are okay-ish. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
what about in the military?
Yep.
Your time in, did you have to deal with much grief very often or what?
I mean, the biggest grief that I had from the military was I hated my job.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the biggest. I didn't really experience any like actual. I never had to like grieve.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No. And I mean, that's a good thing. And the other thing that people a lot of people I don't think understand about the veteran community, and all this is just my personal opinion, but individual experiences may vary.
Absolutely.
You find out somebody's a veteran, that doesn't mean they were in Black Hawk Down. That doesn't mean they're special forces. They could have done anything. They did their job, whatever the hell that meant. But I mean, individual experiences may vary, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so for us, I experienced grief when I was very lucky because our company did not lose anybody. Charlie Company, 1st of the 178th Infantry Regiment out of Kankakee, Illinois, when we deployed from 2008, 2009. When we came home, our first sergeant, who was a police officer in Chicago, his last name's Kelly, First Sergeant Kelly, he got on our bus and he told us, like, we need to be incredibly thankful because every other company, they took losses while we were over there and we didn't. And so despite the combat that we saw and everything like that, we all came home and we need to be very thankful of that. And not long after that, I think it was 1 year, maybe a year and a half, one of the guys that I deployed with killed himself, like shortly after that. Like we made it through that deployment. And I wasn't very good friends with this dude. I just didn't know him super well, but we were familiar with each other and everything. But I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that he did that. Like we went through everything we went through. We went through that deployment. We weren't in the greatest areas in Afghanistan. We saw what we saw. We fucking made it home.
Yeah.
And you made that decision. That was my first experience with suicide in the veteran community.
Yeah.
Now, because I didn't know him that well, it kind of went as far as like the stages. I was just in denial.
Yeah.
And then I jumped to acceptance.
Yep.
Because I didn't know him really well.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But I couldn't wrap my mind around it, and I just jumped right to acceptance. When we were there, we had a mission where we went through some sub-valley south of us, and we'd ran this mission in this area, and it was a pretty bad area, and we made it through the sub-valley, and everything was okay. And then another company rolled through I think it was the next week, or not even that long after, and they hit a pressure plate. And they hit a pressure plate IED. So for anybody that doesn't know, it's much as the name implies. It was just something that when you roll over it and put weight on top of it, it detonates, an improvised explosive device. And it killed everybody in the Humvee. Killed all 4. And I didn't know those 4. One of my very good friends, who's a squad leader in Charlie and my company, did. And we had to do that roll call. And it wasn't the last one, but if you lose somebody, and I don't know, this is the only experience that I have, but when those guys died over there, they called a company formation out on the FOB. We all get out there. They read through all the names. And when they read through the names, when they call your name, you let them know that you're there, that you're here. And then they read the names of those that were killed. And then there's just silence. And we had their boots and their rifle and their helmet and their pictures up. And, guys were just losing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was fucking surreal because you get over there and depending on your deployment, like I said, I wasn't in Black Hawk Down. Our firefights were short-natured, or it would be, some indirect fire, IEDs, mortars, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't like super, super prolonged firefights where I had to watch someone die in front of me.
Yeah.
So to have those types of experiences it really reminds you where the fuck you are.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And again, in those instances, I went from like kind of denial to anger, because it's like, hey, these guys are on my team. You know what I mean? And then to acceptance. And aside from that, the first deaths that I experienced in my personal life were also during my time overseas, in the military. So I was very close with my Aunt Pat and my grandmother, and both of them passed away while I was gone with the military doing something. One was for boot camp, and the other was the day I left for AIT, I think, because I did the split-out program. And so, I think my grandmother passed away the day I left for AIT, and my aunt passed away when I was on my first deployment. And my parents made the decision, which I agree with because it's a shitty decision, but they didn't tell me while I was deployed or while I was at boot camp.
Sure.
They didn't tell me until I got back. And then you feel so much guilt.
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't know about it. Like, I got the letter that my grandma had fallen, hit her head, and that was it. And I got that letter while I was finishing up boot camp. I remember opening up and reading that letter. My dad sent it to me. It happened on the 4th of July, and that was also, coincidentally, a couple of days after I left for AIT. And then my dad sent me that letter when I was finishing up AIT. And so I'd already made it through all the training. And I'm so thankful in a way that he did that, because I wouldn't have been I don't know where I would have been mentally, dude.
Oh, dude, that would have been a mental, game changer. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
And was I angry at first? Yeah. But I got over that quick. Like I was angry at the fact that they didn't tell me initially, but then I got over that because I was like, I understand why they did that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went through all that loss at the same time, but because I was also very busy with the military and my re-understanding of life, it was easier for me to kind of channel my thoughts a little bit, but also in the same time, I didn't really accept what was going on because I didn't have time to process it, But yeah, and then now, as far as the grief we've experienced as adults.
Yeah.
So the first one for you was vision, right? Or what?
Can I actually go back before we switch gears? Yep. Can I go back to the military side of it?
Yeah.
After the IED and you had the formation, was there any further, aside from obviously their buddies and people who feel from higher ups, was there any further grievances or actions, or was it just like business as usual? Let's continue the mission.
It's hard for me to say because I don't remember that as vividly.
Sure.
Because this was 2008, 2009.
Right.
Now, I remember that, I really enjoyed my company. I enjoyed my leadership. My platoon sergeant was awesome. Our squad leaders were phenomenal. Our captain was, he was a captain. Well, he was a second lieutenant. I think he got his first lieutenant over there. But, he's officers are officers, which are fine. But my enlisted leadership, was there, and I just don't remember how the follow-up went. But I do remember that because of the lay of the land, we're at some fob in the middle of BF Afghanistan, it's like, we have a mission to do, though. We can't sit here and hang on to these things. And I got very good at compartmentalizing things when I was overseas because it would happen. But when I was overseas the first time, it was infantry. Yeah. And so guess what? If you're a grunt, you got to be on your fucking A game when you roll out the wire. You can't half-ass your job. If you do, that means someone's going to get killed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the other deployments with the State Department DOD, I was a medic. Guess fucking what? You got to be on your A game when you roll out the wire as a medic too. Oh, yeah. Because if anything happens, it doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life. Right. It doesn't matter, unfortunately. What matters is what's in front of you, and you need to get it done, whatever it is. And so, I got in a habit of being able to package everything up and put it away with the thought process that I would deal with it later. And then I come home from all these deployments And now all of these boxes that I've packed away in the back of my fucking storage shed in my brain are just leaking out because I never got to deal with that shit before. The first time my mom got sick with myelofibrosis, which turns into leukemia, I was in Afghanistan. And I remember when they told me, I was in Gardez, Afghanistan, and I just remember I was wearing my kit, and I laid down on my bed and I just bawled because I was thousands of miles away from my mother.
Yeah.
And I just found this shit out, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then what happens? I got a mission coming up.
You gotta
So
go do
guess
your
what?
mission.
Yup. I gotta fucking go.
Yep.
I gotta put this shit, I gotta pack it up
Yep.
and do my job. And then as I've come home, I thought that I can continue doing that. But through therapy, I've realized that you have to be very careful when you do that kind of stuff because you keep packing it away. You're hoarding all of these shitty memories with the thought process that you're going to deal with it eventually. And all of a sudden it turns into this looming pyre of just bullshit that you've dealt with. And it's all going to come toppling over at some point if you don't deal with it right now or try to start unpacking a couple of those boxes to keep that tower from getting so high. You know what I mean?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
that makes sense.
But and then as far as we've gotten older.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that we talked about that can cause grief is injury or just dealing with something like that, which I guess you might know something to do with. I figured you woke up and you're like, I'm kind of blind. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna. It's not gonna change my life at all.
Nope.
Like I said, now I'm Daredevil.
Yeah.
So I'll become an attorney and I'll fight bad guys, and that's totally fine. And I'm assuming, you took that like a champ. Like everything was totally fine.
Yes. As soon as
Sunshine
it happened.
and rainbows.
Yeah. As soon as I lost my vision, I was like, dude, Daredevil. That's it.
You just went to your wife and like, funniest thing happened.
I
this morning.
actually found all the red latex leather I could and started making a suit.
So the tighter the better. Like I said, just like a great value Daredevil. You're just like out there. You're like, hey guys, I'm going to do my best. Just don't be an asshole.
So I found that if I'm a big fan of assless chaps,
as are everybody else.
So a lot more room for movement.
Yes, and you could probably do more deep lunges and squats
Absolutely.
and things if you had assless chaps.
Absolutely.
It just helps you out a little bit. And I just have the thought, like I said, of you just like walking in and just saying to your wife, like, hey, babe, weirdest thing, I can't fucking see anymore.
Nope.
So I might need you to drive today. And we'll just carry on the way we've been carrying on.
Yep.
So how did you deal with the fact that one of your five senses was all but pretty much taken away from you?
Oh my God, dude. How did I deal with it? Anger. A lot of the grief cycle, just going through it.
As it first started, were you in denial immediately?
Oh, dude, I've been in denial. Yeah, because this can't be happening to me. There's no way. Like, I so many times I would go to bed and I tell myself, you know what, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be able to see tomorrow morning.
Oh, man.
I'm going to wake up and and I did that for months, dude. Months.
I feel like that's just so scary.
Oh, yeah. Because you just, I just kept telling myself, there's no way. Like, oh, he made a small mistake. It'll fix itself. My body will correct itself. It'll be fine. And then I'd wake up and my vision would get a little bit worse. Or the next day I wouldn't be able to see something. Or the next day the light bothered me a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I was like, it'll get better.
Yeah.
It'll get better. And then there came a point where they thought the tumor was causing the vision loss. And I went to treatment for the tumor, and the doctor was like, well, if it is the tumor that's causing the vision loss, it's going to get worse because the treatment it's going to be scar tissue. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But if it is the tumor, your vision will get better. And I was like, awesome. So I was optimistic about
hope.
As they did the surgery, or he did the treatment, like he said, it got worse, but then it went back to where it was at. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of just denial for like I said, for months.
Have you ever accepted it? Are you in the process of accepting it? Do you think you've accepted it? Not even close.
I think I tell myself I accept it. There's days where I do feel like Daredevil and I can take on the world, man.
Good.
But
you should fucking have those days.
But then society or someone's got a comment to say, or somebody, puts their hand in my pocket at a baseball game, and then that really knocks me off a peg or two, and it's just like, damn, dude.
Yeah. But I feel like I forget. I saw this on one of the Stoic podcasts that I listened to, and I don't know if this was a quote from him or from someone else, but his name's Ryan Holiday. And he had a quote that said, what you throw in front of a fire becomes fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
And so with that, what I took away from it was, these things happen to you in your life and you can't control them, but you can control your reaction to it.
Sure.
And you allow those moments to turn you into who you are today, which is somebody that's trying to teach other people, one, what it's like to deal with being visually impaired, and two, how to deal with people that are visually impaired.
Yep.
So it's like, those experiences have to suck something fierce.
Oh, yeah.
But you're turning it into something, which I think is important.
I just hope that people are actually genuinely taking something away from what I'm trying to teach them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what we're both, I think it's kind of safe to say that what we're trying to teach is just unconditional love, really. It's just understanding. It's just like, hey, you're going to see people out there that are living their lives.
Yeah.
You might not understand that. You might see them and you might want to rush to some certain judgment of some kind, but you have to be very careful when you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Because by rushing to that judgment, you can make them, you could plummet them into a pit of despair without even trying. Now, am I saying we need to really tiptoe and walk on eggshells? Not necessarily. It's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we have to accept that there's a lot in the world that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Like if there was a pie chart of things that there are to know, the smallest sliver in that pie chart would be things that we know.
Oh, yeah.
And then a little bit bigger than that sliver would be all the things that we know we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like 99.999% of that pie is shit that we don't know we don't know.
Or shit that we think we know that we're experts on.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a bigger...
I feel like that should be a sliver, too.
That'd be a pretty big slice right before the whole fucking pie.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Is just understanding if you see somebody and they are wearing glasses and they have the walking stick, that they may be able to still recognize shapes and things and see a little bit. They're just more, their vision isn't as good as yours and they need this assistance that you don't need. That doesn't mean that you can assume anything about them. That's all.
Well, and I know you have to get to know somebody, but it's the first step is person first, dude. I want people to not see me as a blind man.
Right.
I want people to see me as Brad.
Right.
Because when they see me as a blind person, they start assuming things. They assume that I have cognitive disabilities and I can't order for myself at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Which has happened multiple times.
People are trying to order for you at restaurants. You're like, bro, we're at McDonald's. Like, I know what the fuck they have here.
No, not people, the waitresses.
Yeah.
Like.
And it comes from a place where they're trying, it never comes from a place of malice, I don't think.
Oh, no,
right?
not at all. Not at all.
But also in that way of trying to be what's the correct terminology? I don't know, patronizing or whatever it may be. It's condescending to you.
Yeah.
And it's just a hard situation because it's not coming from a bad place.
No.
So you're not trying to discipline good behavior, the good behavior of trying to help somebody.
Yep.
You're just trying to let them know, hey, I appreciate that you're taking it this way.
Yeah.
But just so you know, I'm okay doing these things.
Sure.
And I don't need assistance doing these things.
I think just wear the shoe on the other foot, man. If you were standing in a restaurant and I came up to you as a waiter and I asked your spouse, and what are they having? And not asking you, how would you feel?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Or somebody putting their hand into your pants in a bathroom.
It wasn't even in a bathroom.
Yeah.
It was just in public. He put his hand in my pocket and said, "You ain't blind."
And he didn't even know you.
Didn't even know me.
Dudes I deployed with, I'll do that. You know what I mean?
The worst part about it, when I turned around to see who put their hand in my pocket, this dude, he looked like a wall.
Yeah.
He had to have been 6'7", 350. I mean, maybe that was just in my mind because he just put his hand in my pocket.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure he was a behemoth of a gentleman.
Yeah.
I guess I don't really want to call him a gentleman because he put his hand in my pocket. But
and if you walk through life doing that kind of shit to people, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of assumptions that may be unfair, but I'm going to assume you don't have, I mean, you don't have a lot of great people in your life, because if you're the type of person that's going to do some shit like that, you know, you got some issues of your own.
Yeah.
I would think. But yeah. So, I mean, and then as far as the acceptance is concerned, you and I have talked about that the first time we ever met.
Yeah.
First time we met, when you kind of told me what was going on, and I told you that story about the Vietnam veteran that lost his legs. The 2 Vietnam veterans, one lost his legs, became a farmer, and had a family and still lived his life. The other one lost his legs and committed suicide. It was talked about on Jocko Willink's podcast. And with that, when the Vietnam veteran that had lived, had the family, had a full life after losing his limbs, was asked about the other one that killed himself, the veteran said he never accepted what happened to him.
Yeah.
He never accepted that this was his life now, whereas the veteran that was able to move on did.
Yeah.
That's not something that I can speak on, because holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot to be able to accept something like that. But when I told you that story, like, it seemed like that struck a chord with you, because you told me that up to that point, you really hadn't accepted.
Yes. You told me that story, and at that time, I saw that was a possibility.
Yeah.
I saw that was an option.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't want to accept that this was my life. I did not want to accept that people are going to see me as a disability. And a part of me knew that. I knew that nothing was going to be the same again.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I would be lying if I said I didn't think about that or go down that route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, and that's why acceptance was important to you.
Yeah.
Because you needed to understand that, one, I can control what I can control. And if this is what's going on and there's no changing this, well, there's still plenty of things that I have to do in this world.
Absolutely.
Plenty of worth that I have, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, after you were dealt the blow of dealing with the vision impairment, then you got to deal with losing your dad.
Yeah.
So how was that? Was that fine? Was like after you dealt with the vision impairment, just hopped straight into that?
Yeah. Yep. That was
it's always shitty.
again, yeah.
When it comes to, like, with what I'm dealing with my mom, trauma doesn't wait for shit.
Nope.
Unfair bullshit does not care.
Nope.
Doesn't care what you're going on, what you have going on in your life. It doesn't care. Like, when you're going through the day-to-day, the normal day-to-day, and you get into that cruise control spot where it's wake up, help the kids with breakfast, they go to school, you go to work, you come home, spend some time with the spouse, go to bed, wake up the next day, do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you're saying to yourself, like, oh, I don't have any extra time in my day. Like, I don't have time to do anything else. And then, boom, like, life hits you with this fucking traumatic event that changes everything about your life.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, well, I guess I got to just kind of figure this shit out. And it doesn't wait for the most opportune time, because there is no fucking opportune time.
No.
So how did you deal with everything that happened with your dad? And what happened with your dad? Like, talk about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. He went into the hospital emergency room in beginning of April. Bad cough. Thought it was just like COVID.
This year.
Yeah, this year. COVID, bronchitis, whatever. Went in. Well, long story short, turns out it was stage 4 lung cancer. So he was in the hospital, did 1 round of chemo, basically was like, dude, fuck this. I want to go home, spend time with my family. So we moved him into my sister's house, actually in the hospice care.
Yep.
And then once that happened, I was there every day at my sister's house.
And how long was that?
So he moved into my sister's house beginning of May. Yeah, end of April, beginning of May. And then he passed May 24th.
Okay.
So it was about 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks. Yeah.
So May, so
Mhm.
not very long ago.
May. Yep.
So how has the grief process been for you? Have you been going through those stages? Have you been where have you been at?
I have, and it really is a cycle. I there's days where I wake up and I'm in just straight denial. Like, there's no way. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way. Like, I'm just gonna pick up my phone and call my dad. There's no way that he's dead. And then the next day, I'm like, you know what? It sucks. He's gone, but I have this memory, and I laugh and I think of the good times.
Yeah.
And then there's days where I just want to break shit.
Yep.
And it is. Every day is different. It's a cycle. It's wet noodles.
Did we hung out shortly after your dad passed, didn't we? When you called me, we hung out in the garage for a little while.
We did. Yep.
I think that was like days after.
It was. Yep.
And I feel like at that point you're still in so much shock.
Yeah.
And just trying to understand. And like you can't even wrap your mind around what happened. You know what I mean? And how do you feel like you've been doing now? Do you feel like you're still in the throes of everything? Do you feel like you're making some progress? What do you think?
Again, it is different on the day.
Yeah.
I think I feel like I'm making progress. But then the other day I was doing laundry and I was sitting in the basement and I was just waiting for my dog to start barking because my dad walked in the door. Because he would just like periodically do that. You know what I'm saying? He would just like stop by and then the dog would go crazy.
Yeah.
And I was just waiting.
Yeah.
And it never came.
And that's something that makes me hate Facebook memories and Snapchat.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
I appreciate it and also not at the same time because, you know, it shows you all these memories. It shows you all these happier times, these more fun times. And it's good to be reminded of that. But because you don't get to control when you get reminded of it,
yeah,
it's almost like it's a little intrusive into your life.
Yep.
Where you're just like, listen, I'm processing my grief, and Facebook's like, hey, remember when your mom came over and you guys baked together and laughed and had a great time? Like, oh, cool. I guess I'm going to cry on my way to work today. Like, holy shit. And I've noticed it seems like the way that you've been processing it again, it's not something that gets better, but it seems like you've been doing a pretty good job as far as how you've been getting through it.
I'm trying, man. Yeah. I think in my mind, it feels like I have to be strong always. One, because I'm a man, so in society, I just feel like I have to do that.
Fuck that.
Two, because I feel like I am the support for my family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I am supposed to be the man of the house.
Carry the weight.
Like, this is my house. This is my family. Like, I'm a man. That I'm not saying like I don't do that. Like, I do take care of my stuff, but I am noticing I'm not like a traditional manly man.
No, fuck all that.
You know what I'm saying?
Fuck all that stuff about traditional masculinity, in my opinion. Because when you're talking about being strong, the definition to me of being strong has changed greatly over time.
For sure.
And now I believe part of being strong is being able to admit whatever emotions you're dealing with, admitting that you have problems and flaws and that you're working on them. That's fucking strength. When you see somebody admitting that they're having a hard time, that they're having a problem, and they're doing their best, that is a strength because you had the strength to fucking tell other people that you are dealing with some of the hardest shit in your life. You have the ability to be emotional, and I think that's what strong is now, to me at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Speaking of strength, dude.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Fuck, not great.
No?
Not doing great. So my mom, in June, she called me up one afternoon and she said that she had a pain in her stomach. So remember, she had myelofibrosis in like 2013, 14, something like that. And she kicked its ass, got a bone marrow transplant. It was a whole thing, exhausting situation. But my mom crushed it. And then, she calls me up one day. She's telling me about this pain she has. And I said, Ma, go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I said, Mom, go to the emergency room. You need to get it checked out. Like, just be on the safe side. Because again, that mentality of, I'm just going to tough this shit out.
Yeah.
Doesn't really go well. It doesn't really go well long term, especially when it's a serious issue. So I said, Ma, go to the hospital. She goes to the hospital. My dad's like, hey, they're going to do a surgery. She has a bowel obstruction. I'm like, okay. And I was at a golf outing.
Yeah.
And my dad called me. And he said, hey, they finished the surgery. And I said, okay. And he goes, but then the doctor took me into a room, and the second he said that, I felt the blood leaving my face, like leaving my head. I'm standing there on the golf course. I can still remember, it didn't happen long ago. I can remember where I was standing. I was with a very good friend of mine. I was golfing with somebody I used to work for, Rob, over at Certapro Painters. And my dad said that they found masses, a lot of them, and that we were going to have to do a biopsy and see what all it was. And my dad started to lose it over the phone a little bit. Now, what we talked about earlier, I've seen my dad cry maybe once in my life.
Yep.
And it's not that he tries to portray himself as an overly masculine person. My dad is awesome. He just hasn't cried in front of me. He just never really cried in front of me. And so to hear him cry, I was like, immediately I went numb for a minute. And I said to myself, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to finish this round of golf, and then I'm going to go over there. Like, that's the first thing I said to myself, as dumb as that might have been. I made it half a hole. I got to the tee box. I hit my drive. It was a terrible drive, which has nothing to do with the fact that I was grieving and everything to do with the fact that I'm a fucking terrible golfer. And I was going to get the ball, and Rob came up to me, and he was like, hey, dude, like, if you got to go, I don't care, man. I don't care. We don't need to finish this outing. And when he said that and looked at me, I started crying.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even get it out. I was like, I got to go.
Yeah.
So I get in the car. That was the beginning of the process. So the past month and a half, my mom, she's dealing with this aggressive and rare form of adenocarcinoma. And she was in the hospital for a while. And the whole time, we had to transfer her from one hospital to another hospital. We transferred her to a hospital up north in Naperville called Edward Hospital, which they've been doing a phenomenal job. They're like a cancer center and all this other shit.
Yeah.
And you spend so much time at that hospital that hospital becomes a home to you too.
Been there, man. Actually, that's where I did all of my brain surgeries and all
at
my
Edward?
treatments. Yeah, at Edward. Yep.
Great hospital.
Absolutely.
And like, we talk about offensive language in culture. Like, culture talks about offensive language all the time. And offensive language is offensive means something that causes that upsets you greatly, right?
Sure.
And what pisses me off is when we attribute offensiveness to words like fuck. You know what I mean? No.
Yeah.
Word fuck isn't offensive. You know what's offensive to me?
Cancer.
Days to weeks. That's fucking offensive to me.
Yeah.
When the doctor told me that my mom had days to weeks, that was the most offensive fucking thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I'm not taking that out on the doctor. But you want to talk about offense? You're telling me that's as offensive as fuck? Because the reason why we say fuck cancer is because there's no other word that can properly convey all of the emotions and hatred and everything that someone feels about cancer than the word fuck.
Yeah.
When it comes to fuck cancer.
Yeah.
And like, I've spent so much time up at the hospital. I would go up there and stay the night up there. There would be times where I would come home, because that's a drive. It's like a little over an hour, right?
Oh yeah, that's a haul.
So I'd go up there, come home, and then I would say to myself, like, you know what? I'm not happy with how much time I spent up there. And I would turn around and fucking go back, and then I'd stay the night.
Yeah.
And I would stay the night, and there were times where I just held my mom's hand for hours. There was times where we went through all of that bullshit.
Been there, man.
And like, because I just told myself I'm not going to regret it.
Yeah.
And then we were told that she needed hospice, going to hospice care. And when they first told me that, I got mad at the doctor that told me, right?
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have. The doctor was doing her fucking job. But I wasn't ready to handle that shit. And that was hard for me. And then once we dealt with the fact that we were going to have to get her home, we finally brought her home. And right now she's in hospice care through Uplifted Care, which is a phenomenal organization. Like, I'd worked with them as a nonprofit. They've helped me out with veterans. They do phenomenal things at Uplifted Care. And I was very thankful that they could be the ones that take care of my mother. But it puts you in this weird place when your parent is under that type of care.
Yeah.
Because you're like, do I give up hope completely?
Yep.
Do I prepare myself for the possible future? Because like I'm talking to my mom and she's still strong as shit. Before we did this episode, I picked up Brad. I brought him to my house or my parents' house because I needed to help my mom with things.
Yep.
And the second we left, you got a little teary eyed because that shit brought everything back.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
And-
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off. Go ahead.
no. And you saw her.
Yeah.
And the first thing she said was, she was just like, hi, Brad.
Yeah.
And she goes, I like the podcast.
Yeah. Yep.
She listens and she's still listening right now. And she's strong as shit and she looks great.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to that hospice nurse and they're just like, we need to stop taking these medications because they're long-term medications. And you're like, Jesus.
Yeah. You know what the worst part of hospice care for my dad was?
What?
One day he was sitting up, doing great,
Yeah.
talking, doing amazing. And it's like the next day, dude, he was gone.
You don't get to choose and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And when it happens to a family member, the other difficult part about it is all of the other people in your family's life that may end up reaching out to you about what's going on.
Yeah.
And somebody needs to spread the message of what's happening. But what's also hard is when everybody is asking you and you're essentially reliving everything multiple times a day.
I know the struggle, man. I get it. I get it.
And the moments that I've had with her, I'm extremely thankful for. Like I said, my mom is tough as shit. So I still have some hope based on how she's been presenting and everything like that. When we were at the hospital, she gave recipes to like every fucking nurse. The one benefit of being Filipino is when you go to a hospital, guess what, bro?
All the nurses are Filipino.
Yep. They're like, oh, you're Filipino? They stop by, hang out a little bit. My mom, like I said, she was giving out recipes to everybody and just... We've been bringing friends by her house. We brought friends that she hasn't seen in a really long time, and those are super emotional.
Yep.
And now as the son, I'm kind of going through all this stuff and trying to be the strong one. And I'm very thankful because the strong person in a grieving process bounces around.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's me, sometimes it's my dad. And thank God that up to this point, it's always one of us.
Yeah.
If I'm breaking down, all of a sudden my dad just snaps to it. And all of a sudden he's the strong one and he's helping me get through. And then when he's hurting, then I step up. There was only one moment where, and this moment will live rent free in my head, regardless of the outcome. But my grandmother and my uncle came from California to visit with my mom, and we were all up at the hospital together. And my mom had her first moment kind of breaking down. Because like I said, my mom's the strongest person I know. Not strongest woman. She's the strongest person I know. And the only time I saw her break down was that moment. And she cried and she looked at us and said, I'm not ready to go yet.
Yeah.
And dude, every single one of us just fucking lost it at that point. Ugly, crying, sobbing, like, what do you fucking say? And I zoomed out of that moment and I just saw flashing lights and a big sign that said, hey, this is the worst moment of your fucking life, buddy. Like, this is going to just be hanging out in your head for a super long fucking time. Like, we need to embrace it, roll with it, accept it.
Yep.
But I knew that was going to be the worst moment, one of the worst moments. And after that happened, I immediately called up some of my best friends. And thankfully, like, I was just like, it was late. And I said, hey guys, I need some help right now.
Yeah.
And immediately they all came over to my house. It was like 10 o'clock at night, brought a case of beer. We drank until about 2 in the fucking morning, outside, sitting around a fire, arguing about the differences between country music and Western music, just doing shit like that. And it made me feel better. And all of them have also lost a family member at some point.
Yeah.
And I cried to them. And it wasn't just that conversation. I cried to them. I got it out. And then we just talked like we would normally talk. And it was so helpful for me. But it's been a wave so far. And I don't know what to expect. But, I know that my mom listens to this. So again, just so she knows, I love you. And you are doing amazing right now. And I'm so proud of you, Mom. But yeah, dude. So it's hard. It's okay, dude.
Oh, man.
Hey, Emotional's in the fucking name, buddy.
Damn straight, dude. God.
And the thing is when it comes to getting emotional and crying, other people apologize for it. Not me. I don't give a shit. I'm not apologizing for crying.
Yeah.
Because that's how I feel. And the people in my life that I care about deserve every tear. So I'm not going to fucking apologize for it. You know what I mean? And that's one of the stigmas that we're trying to talk about here. Is you're going to get emotional about shit. And that's fine. I didn't even mean to say the name of the podcast, and I just did. That's how great our marketing is.
Hell
Jeez.
yeah.
But so to kind of try to make this a little more positive, one of the things that that I've dove into throughout this is, again, reading. And in so, a book that I've talked about before, Man's Search for Meaning, by Dr. Viktor Frankl. I said that I shouldn't have led into this saying it was positive because it's pretty fucking depressing at first. But Dr. Frankl, he was a Holocaust survivor. He was in Auschwitz, he was in Dachau, and he's a psychologist, I believe psychologist. And in Man's Search for Meaning, he lost his wife, he lost his brother and his mother, and possibly his father in those death camps. Okay? So he went through that shit. And then afterwards, he still managed to help other people deal with trauma. And what he said in that book, he says a lot of things. He quotes Friedrich Nietzsche when he says, "Those who have a why can bear almost any how," and the need for meaning, and how when you suffer without meaning, it becomes despair. And despair is the scariest place, the place you don't want to fucking go. And you have to make sure that you try to assign meaning to your suffering. And he did that. And he suffered in a way that I can't even fathom.
Oh, no.
I can't even, you listen to that book, you read that book, and it's like, I can't imagine what he went through personally, much less with all the losses that he felt with. So with that, the fact that he was able to add meaning to the suffering and he was able to find his way out of it, that lets me know that that's possible. That lets me know that people can do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what you need, right? And for me, the meaning is, if I can go through this suffering and it can help me help others that are suffering, then there's meaning there.
Absolutely.
Because these things that we're dealing with, a lot of people have to deal with. And it can be very easy to say to yourself that there's no fucking meaning to this at all. Trust me. I have said that time and time again with clenched fists and a clenched jaw and tears running down my fucking face. But I try to remind myself, there's a meaning to this, okay? Regardless of the outcome, there's a meaning. And if it's going to make you stronger, if it's going to make you somebody that can better help other people that are going through the same thing, then you have fucking meaning.
I think we found it. This podcast is a product of meaning, dude.
Yeah?
I genuinely think this is my purpose.
Yeah.
At least right now.
Yeah.
I think this is the meaning that I've been searching for. And I agree with everything that you just said.
Well, it's a lot. And you've been through a lot that you don't give yourself enough credit for. And again, we're just here to try to help other people because, like I said earlier, too, I know so many people that have suffered some sort of catastrophic loss in the past 6 months, year, during COVID, whatever, grandparents, parents, kids, whatever, spouse, holy shit, and divorces. It's so hard. And it's so easy to try to blow past all of the stages of grief to think that you don't have fucking time to deal with it.
Yeah.
And you put it on the back burner and then it just festers and it turns into some super destructive shit at some point in your life.
Yep.
And so what we're just trying to do is make sure that you acknowledge it and you talk about it and you just try to process it in as productive and constructive of a way as possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the goal.
Well, so as far as grief is concerned, we didn't get nearly as emotional as I thought. I thought I was going to cry the entire fucking time.
Yeah, I did too.
Especially when I talk about my mom.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's something I almost can't really control sometimes.
Yeah.
When I just feel that way.
Just happens. I
think we did all right.
As
far as things that a positive way to end this, while I like to look for stories online, I wanted to use a real big positive in my own life. So, kind of like I was talking about earlier, for me, this has been the worst experience of my life. This has been the hardest experience of my life. I'll be very open with all of it. The range of emotions I've dealt with, how hard it's been on my whole family, and everything like that. And so one day I went over to the Veterans Assistance Commission of Kankakee County, and I talked to my friend over there, who's also chair of Project Headspace and Timing, Karen Smetansky. And she said that there was an envelope dropped off at the VAC for me, because people know that I go to the VAC. I was like, okay. And I figured it was just a letter or a bill. I figured like maybe it was a bill for Project Headspace and Timing or something.
Yep.
And so I got the envelope and I opened it up, and a bunch of gift cards fell out. There was a gift card for Casey's, for Monocle's, for Dunkin' Donuts, and for a massage place. And there was a letter in there that said, "Dear Peterson family." And it talked about how we understand, that you're going through a lot as a family right now. And we know how much you do for your community. So please take these things, get gas, get coffee. There was a Monocle's gift card. I don't know if I said that, to take my family out to get some pizza. And I was like, we love you. We care for you. We're here for you. This is from your community. And like, I read that. And like I said, initially, I was pretty composed. And I sent a picture of it to my wife. And so she could read it. And she was at work, and she called me 5 seconds later, and she was just like, "Who said that?" Like, she was, and when she started doing that, like, I was right in tow. I was like, I know, it's so sweet. Like, I was fucking, I was ugly crying. She was ugly crying.
If it makes you feel better, I noticed you posted that on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I was ugly crying.
Oh my God.
I was like, people are so nice.
Because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
Nothing makes the grief go away.
Yeah.
Nothing just takes it away from you. But the reminder that there are people around you that love you,
Yeah.
and they're just not going to let you be alone. Why I think that helps is it helps give meaning to your suffering.
Yep.
Because you know that, hey, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm with these people. I can feel these feelings. I can go through these emotions. I can go through the stages of grief, and I can still be who I am.
Yep.
And it's going to change me, and that's okay, because there's nothing I can do about that. I have to accept it, right?
Yeah.
And so to have that kind of support is just, there's no words to describe what that means. So,
Yeah.
But other than that, you got anything else to say about grief?
I don't, man.
We could cry some more. We could just end it with us bawling.
We
You
should.
could sit on my lap.
Now
We
would
could
be,
cry that way.
Now would be a pretty good time.
How awkward would that have been if you were sitting on my lap and we were both crying?
How much more awkward would it have been if I was sitting on your lap facing you and we were both crying?
I feel like it'd be less awkward because then we were like looking at now. I don't know, because the angles and my back's fucked up. But either way, we just hope that if you are dealing with grief in any sort of way, that you can find some solace in knowing you're not the only one. There's a lot of productive ways to deal with grief, but it all starts with understanding what you're dealing with and not beating yourself up about it. So if you have any other questions, please, reach out to us, and we'll direct you to any other resources we have, or reach out to Melanie on the page, licensed professional counselor, who's just a wealth of knowledge on everything. We hope that you are doing as fine as you can. We love you unconditionally, and we'll see you next time.